Uber and Lyft have been granted an emergency stay in California thanks to a ruling in an appeals court. Now, both companies had initially said that they had to cease operations in California over a new law that would require them to classify drivers as employees and not independent contractors as they do now. Shares of both Uber and Lyft fell on the news that they were suspending operations, but the surge after this appeals court ruling, they surged. For more on this, we're joined by Brett Sifling, director of Get Invested, Kawasaki Health Wealth, rather, and Investment Management. Brett, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And Brett, there is so much going on here. So I have to ask, are Uber and Lyft safe until Californians vote on this proposition, Prop 22, in November?
I don't think that they're necessarily safe. I mean, there's no doubt that Lyft and Uber are really taking advantage of these drivers. They've moved into these markets and asked for forgiveness rather than asking for permission, which is, according to their game plan, what they've done all over the US. And California is really trying to lay down the law here.
Yeah, and which company do you think would be more exposed to a law requiring them to classify their workers as employees rather than contractors?
Yeah, well, I think they will both inevitably figure it out. I mean, neither one of them are going to give up the California market. It's huge here, and ultimately, I do think Uber would benefit a little bit more since they are around the world. They can find different markets that may have cheaper labor, maybe relaxed legislation that can, ideally let them operate there at the most profitable capacity.
And Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi had a really big op-ed that came out a couple of weeks ago saying that the binary nature of employment laws is problematic for the gig economy. Excuse me, it's a mouthful. So where do you fall on this? Do you think that he has a point?
Yeah, I do think he has a point. This, W-2 versus 1099 system is kind of archaic in a sense. These lawmakers really do need to catch up with technology. I mean, they've only now just started to set precedents for things like this when they really should have been doing this when Uber and Lyft were here years and years ago.
It is also really interesting, though. We've been covering this saga over the past few weeks, and I'm sure we're going to be covering it well into October and November. And I heard from a guest yesterday speaking on this topic saying that Uber and Lyft and these ride sharing companies should also be held accountable because they have grown so big, growing on the backs of these drivers who have really built the business and also get a lot of the tax incentives and other benefits that come with being a large company. Do you think there's something to be said about that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, like the traditional cab business of getting a medallion, they really took pride there, and they took a lot of expertise and training for them to be in that industry. And so, having Uber and Lyft say that they're a technology platform and really stepping in, that's not true. Drivers are essential core to their business, and I think that they will figure it out.
And Brett, I also want to ask about Prop 22. For those who aren't familiar, how big of an impact is this going to have on these companies' businesses, especially in California?
Well, it's certainly going to have an impact. I mean, they're going to have to start offering benefits, but it's not really all as black and white as it seems. Like, these drivers actually really like the flexibility of being able to drive when they want. And maybe they need to figure out a way. I mean, they were testing if they could let the Uber drivers, basically set their own rate up to 5x what the normal market price was. And I think that that is more of a great solution. So I don't think that it's so binary with the pass of this law or not. I think that they will inevitably figure it out to make everyone happy, since this is such an integral part of the California system. We don't have a really great public transit here. We really depend on these rideshare companies in a sense.
It's so true. Do you think it also makes a difference, as a Southern California native myself, that so many people do own cars themselves and do rent cars, so don't necessarily use ride sharing in, say, like the more suburban communities in California?
Certainly in the more suburban communities, that's true. But a lot of millennials and younger people here in LA, Uber and Lyft were so cheap, and these ride-sharing companies were so cheap that they just gave up their cars, and they were using these companies as a system to get around town, to doctor's appointments, to work, whatever it was. They really sincerely depended on these drivers.
Such a good point. I have a lot of friends in the LA area who were saying, yeah, it's just not worth the investment into a car and leasing and insurance when I can just take Ubers or Lyfts everywhere. But I'm wondering, do you think this contention makes ride sharing companies like Lyft an acquisition target for another company looking to get into this industry? Let's just put it out there, say something like Tesla.
Yeah, certainly. We love Tesla. Our company is well known for it, and they're really ahead of the game with full self-driving and self-driving cars in general. And if this is going to be the major driving issue of, whether we need to pay these people more or not, offer the drivers benefits or not, well, eventually there's not going to be a driver in this new world, in this digital world. Eventually, we will stop having this problem. It's only a matter of time.
Brett Sifling, Director of Get Invested, Kawasaki Wealth and Investment Management. Thank you so much for your insight and for joining us this morning.